Okay. So yeah, that was about the previous section was on music and the role it played in desegregation, leading the way. Now we're looking at other important topics in the 1950s with regard to US history and Latino history in particular. The focus is on these three things: Operation Wetback, the military-industrial complex, and Chavez Ravine. These are some of the things going on in the background that help us understand what was going on. You might recall when I lectured on immigration and with regard to immigration from Mexico, is this whole back and forth of being wanted and unwanted, being recruited and being kicked out. And that is never more evident than in the 1950s, where the Bracero program is still in place. The Bracero program is recruiting Mexicans from 1942 and until 1964. And in the middle of that, we have Operation Wetback, trying to deport as many undocumented people as possible. And Wetback is a derogatory term, but yet that was the official name of this operation, of this activity. The person in charge of this in 1953 was literally someone from the Army, Lieutenant General Joseph Swing, who was commander of the 6th Army. And so no surprise, he conducted this like a military campaign. He controlled what information was released to the press. They would approach all Mexican-looking people that they would come across. And so there's including US citizens. They did end up finding and deporting over 1 million people. And despite, controlling what information got released to the press and so forth, there was a strong reaction to this from society and from the Mexican government itself that protested this and ended it. And it's just interesting that for many years, these kinds of stories, like the internment of Japanese Americans or Operation Wetback, were cautionary tales of things that had happened in the past, but that we never thought could happen again. And now things like Operation Wetback are actually inspiration for people who want to do this to even a greater extent currently, instead of a cautionary tale of something we shouldn't do again. And so, yeah, that's just kind of unbelievable, the state we're in. The Cold War and the military-industrial complex. So after World War II, we begin the Cold War. A Cold War was a war between the Soviet Union and the United States. And it was referred to as a Cold War because we never fought each other directly. It was always indirectly. And so as the military-industrial complex is something that got built up in preparation in case it ever became a direct hot war between these two world powers. And so the United States invested a lot into its military, and we still have the legacies of this investment, and we still have a military-industrial complex today, even though the Cold War ended around 1990. Some examples of this. In 1950, the United States would spend $12 billion which was 30% of the US budget. In 5 years, that quadrupled to 40 billion and became 65% of the US budget. A more recent number in 2010, it went up to 689 billion, but to a lower percentage of the US budget. And, here we also get an idea of how much that compares to other things we spend on. Now, why is it called the military-industrial complex? Why not just call it the military? The implication is that it is a interdependent system that obviously includes the military, but also includes, for example, businesses that make money from make lots of money from the money that is designated by Congress for military purposes. Think, the companies who make fighter jets, all the defense industry, the companies who make battleships. It includes those big things, but also includes a lot of little things, like the companies that provide the food for the people that are US soldiers all over the world. And so there's businesses that have a vested interest that the government continue to spend a lot of money in the military, and they'll lobby politicians so that they continue spending more on the US military so that their businesses will continue making more money. And so then you start getting the politicians involved as part of this military-industrial complex too, where they're being lobbied, where they're getting campaign contributions by the defense industry or the people who make money from having contracts with the military so that they continue investing in the military. And so there's this whole system, interdependent system, that feeds off of the different components so that the military continues to grow and grow. These numbers are the ones I just repeated. In this slide, I add 2020, more recent number, 732 billion, or 15% of the US budget. So the percentage of the US budget has been going down. And yeah, and this is just a funny comic. I have all these nuclear missiles, all these battleships, all these planes. I spend more in my military than the next 12 nations combined. And despite spending more every year, I still feel insecure. It's simple. You have a military-industrial complex. An example with regard to nuclear weapons. And I'm not going to quiz you on any of these numbers from 1962. This is just to demonstrate how many we had. We had 50 intercontinental ballistic missiles, 80 missiles on nuclear submarines, 1,700 on bombers capable of reaching the Soviet Union, 1,000 land-based supersonic fighters able to carry atomic bombs. The height of this was in 1967, when we had 31,000 nuclear weapons. More recent numbers, in 2020, we have 3,750. In the 1980s, they would refer to this as being MAD, as mutual aided destruction, because any nuclear war was going to result in us destroying them and them destroying us. And we had so many nuclear weapons that we could destroy every major city on the planet multiple times. That's how many weapons we had. Cold War ends around 1990, but we still continue with the legacies of the Cold War, and we definitely still have a military-industrial complex. Some examples of that. The United States has troops in over 150 countries in the world. If there are 195 countries in the world, we have troops in 77% of countries in the world. Then we have US military bases in over 60 countries of the world. Our spending in our US military is more than the next 11 biggest top spenders in their militaries, all combined, don't add up to what the US spends. And this includes China, India, Russia, the UK, everybody. The biggest spenders combined don't add up to what we spend. One of the newer things that is playing a bigger role the last 2.5 decades is private military companies or mercenaries. Mercenaries are people who get paid, people who are soldiers just because they're being paid to be soldiers. The United Nations made mercenaries illegal in 1989, but it wasn't supposed to kick into effect until 2001. And so the way they've gotten around this is by saying they're not mercenaries, they're private military companies for self-defense. And so they're saying they're not the forces, like soldiers doing attacking, that they are only doing protection, self-defense. But mercenaries and PMCs make countries less accountable. It allows country is essentially like paramilitaries, where wherever there's a conflict, it used to be, say in the 1970s during the Cold War, where a country would have its soldiers, and then there would be paramilitaries, and they would say, well, that wasn't us, it was the paramilitaries who did those atrocious things, even though those paramilitaries existed for the purpose of helping governments achieve their goals. So now these PMCs act similarly, where countries have less accountability, and it allows corporations to impose their will abroad. So now the United Fruit Companies of the world, the big corporations of the world, they no longer have to necessarily convince, the United States or other countries to go act on their behalf to force a third world country to do what they want them to do. Now the corporations can directly hire these PMCs to impose their will abroad, to serve as a threat, kind of a modern version of the gunboat diplomacy of the 19th century. One example of this that's been getting attention the last several years is the Wagner Group, hired by Russia to fight in Africa and Ukraine. But a lot of these also come from the United States. Private military soldiers from PMCs are now 10% of US soldiers. Private military companies from the US are in over 50 countries and on 6 continents of the planet. Some examples: in Iraq, they had 180,000 PMCs in 2007. And so this also allowed, US politicians to say, you know, we only have this number of soldiers, or we're decreasing the number of soldiers, and then not tell you how many PMCs or whether the number of PMCs are growing, because they're only counting their soldiers. But they made up 25% of the people in combat in Iraq at that time. And again, these PMCs are not just doing things that are about self-defense. There's one PMC, Silver Corps USA in 2020, tried to overthrow Maduro in Venezuela. Or I told you the example of Haiti earlier in the semester, where the PMC that killed the president of Haiti just a few years ago was a PMC from the United States. And 25% of the members of that group that went and assassinated the Haitian president had been trained by the United States military directly. The most well-known of PMCs from the United States started off as Blackwater, but they had an incident in 2007 that, along with other incidents, that got them a bad reputation. In 2007, they killed 17 unarmed civilians. I think this was in Iraq. And so this and other incidents got them a bad reputation. Four specific people in 2014, 7 years later, were sentenced to jail. Blackwater, to kind of get rid of this bad reputation, you know, they rebranded, and they got bought up by other groups to distance themselves from their own name. Then they became XC Services, then they became Academy, became Triple Canemy, and then now they're part of Constellus Holdings. Those four people that were sentenced to jail in 2014 were pardoned by President Trump right at the end of his previous administration. All right, moving back to the 1950s, and Mexican-American communities and things that were happening throughout the United States, is the example of Chavez Ravine. Chavez Ravine, you might recall, was that neighborhood just north of downtown Los Angeles, where the Navy had built a base. And it was from that base that there was a lot of tensions that the Zoot Suit riots essentially started from. Chavez Ravine ended up being targeted by City Hall politicians, by LA politicians, for something that was referred to as urban renewal. Now, this was something that started increasingly happening in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s throughout the United States, not just in Los Angeles. Urban renewal is when politicians would identify the quote-unquote ugly part of town, the ugly part of the city, and they would say, we're just gonna, you know, renew it, make it nice. But the way they would do it is they would target communities of color, kick everybody out, and then build new things that were not intended for that community that they kicked out. Now, this is a notice that was given to the residents of Chavez Ravine in 1950, where they were told that they needed to move, they didn't have a choice, but they were told that the reason they were doing that is because they were going to build affordable housing there. and that they would have first dibs, an opportunity, the first opportunity to move into that affordable housing. They kicked people out, whether they own property or were renting. They kicked them out. They did pay them market value if they own the property. This is something that US governments can do and do on a regular basis. It's called eminent domain. Eminent domain is when the government, whether it be city, county, state, or federal, if the government decides that they need land for the benefit of the greater good, of the good of the city, the county, the state, or the federal government, then you don't have a choice. They can kick you out and pay you market value for your property. So yeah, they were kicked out. There were people who protested this and tried to fight it. And they did succeed in fighting it for 9 years. Here is the last family of Chavez Ravine being forcibly removed by the sheriffs. The Arechiga family is the name of the last name of the family. That was the last one to stay. They ended up having to be removed by force by the sheriffs. But once they got rid of everyone, they decided that affordable housing was too much of a socialist or communist idea. Again, this is during the height of the Cold War. And so instead, they decided to, after they got rid of everybody, to sell Chavez Ravine to the Dodgers and build Dodger Stadium there instead. And then the Brooklyn Dodgers moved to Los Angeles, where they've been ever since. And so if you ever catch a baseball game being played in Los Angeles, you might catch, now that you know about Chavez Ravine, you might catch when they mention Chavez Ravine.
Hello, everybody. This is Julio Antonio from LatinoReport.com. As you can see, I got the sunglasses on today because we are in sunny Southern California at the Chavez Ravine to watch the Los Angeles Dodgers take on the Arizona Diamondbacks.
Yeah. So yeah, but again, this was something that happened throughout the country for many decades. Not something exclusive to Los Angeles or Chavez Ravine.